Okay, so welcome everybody to our second Artist Teacher Alumni webinar. It's very exciting to have you all here and to be able to present Zoe and Irina, who are going to talk about their practice. They both graduated last year, so submitted dissertations in September. So it's not that they're quite the newest bunch of alumni that we have, and we got quite a few of that cohort who are here as well, which is lovely and really nice to see everybody. So welcome. Okay, without much ado, I'm going to pass over to Zoe.
Okay, thank you. All right, okay, hopefully. Okay, is that working? Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thank you. Right, hello everybody. My name's Zoe Crockford, and my initial reason for offering to talk to you is that since I've graduated, I've discovered, I've continued to discover and to explore things about my artistic practice that I wasn't banking on discovering. So I promised myself that I wasn't going to give you a history of everything that I've made since year one, and then I decided that I was going to do that. So it's going to be quite sort of brief history, and the reason why I'm doing it is because there are some significant points throughout the last nearly 4 years now that coincidentally link together, and I found that I've actually made a massive circular journey from where I started. So the slide that you're looking at now are the first notes that I made during our intro session at the Pitt Rivers when we just about to start the course, and I'd been really taken with the notion of circles, and I was looking at sort of protective things and amulets and charms, and that's something that I really wanted to work with, but I was questioning sort of who I was as an artist, thinking about, you know, where was I coming from? What were my reasons for going on the course? What was I going to be doing? I hadn't considered it at all. But this little notebook, these were the notes that I made at the time, but I recently found them again and was quite surprised at how the work that I'm doing now since I graduated actually links back to this, which I'd completely forgotten about. So it had been there the whole time in my subconscious, and it just sort of amuses me and intrigues me that actually I've come back to that point after quite a significant creative journey. So I started off taking that as a starting point, thinking about my artist identity. I started looking at maps, looking about journeys, thinking about where I'd lived over the past few years, looking at different kinds of materials, and I was really just playing and just exploring what they would do. And I struggled a lot because I find it really difficult to restrict myself in terms of materials that I use. So I was working with textiles, I was working with paper, I was working with ceramics. It was just all over the place, but actually it was all linked together because there was a common thread. I felt the need to try to restrict myself, but I was failing massively. So then I was starting to branch out into looking at more sculptural things, looking at multiples and collections, keeping things precious, locking things away, hiding things, secrets, or hurtful things, and how you could potentially keep them sort of safely shut away. So this led to a very short set of work. But at the same time, I was really floundering. So I then started working with clay more successfully. But again, the same sort of themes were running through everything. And this is where my work really sort of took off in terms of production. So I became quite prolific. And I found the repetitive nature of using clay really quite reassuring, and I think I was able to produce multiples, which is something that I just felt the need to do. So producing series and sets of things. So this then, all of this work that I was churning out ended in my first solo exhibition, which was a real turning point in terms of how I presented myself and how I was seen. So again, my identity really came to the fore in terms of I really felt that I'd launched myself as an artist, whereas before then I'd felt as if I was just a student that was playing at being an artist, and a teacher that was, you know, sometimes dabbled a bit and thought they knew everything. So my first exhibition was a real sort of turning point, and the reason why I had this exhibition was because it was a course requirement, but I felt that it was a punctuation point in my creative practice, because when I look back at it now, I feel like it was quite naive, because I had a big space to fill and I needed to fill it, and I didn't have enough work, so I just went overboard, just churning out as much work as I could purely to fill the space. And it was really broad, and I think I did myself a disservice in actual fact, although it was a good learning experience. So it was a culmination of a period of time where I was frantically making, but it was also the end. It was a punctuation point, so it sort of marked the end, but it also marked a new beginning. After that, I was really struggling, because I'd worked up until that point. I'd reached my target. I'd achieved what I set out to achieve. But then I thought, well, what am I supposed to do now? Where do I go? So I just went back to the things that I'd been looking at, and just started exploring and just sort of reconnecting. And sort of just playing really with everything that I'd been making. But again, it all started to get really broad and out of control. At this point, lockdown was in full force, and I didn't have access to materials. I was very much home-based, so I was scrabbling around to just use the things that were available to me. But this meant that I don't know, this need to just try things in lots of different ways. It's all connected, because I felt as though I was still traveling along this theme that I was looking at. And then in amongst all this was grew my obsession with pavements, which I still have. I have now hundreds of pictures of pavements, and it's still something that it came out of all of my lockdown walks. So just trudging the same bit of ground every day, and looking at how familiar the same broken paving slabs were. So every day I'd do the same route, and every day I would pass by the same things. I started photographing them, I started manipulating them digitally, and then they fed into the painting work that I was then doing. I wasn't doing anything with ceramics, and in fact I haven't since. It was that the undercurrent, I was looking at damage and repair, I was looking at journeys, thinking about traces of existence, and it sort of, I don't know, it still puzzles me why paving slabs can get broken and how they get broken in such intricate ways. So this sort of this collection of photography is forming the backbone of my work, starting in 2020, I suppose, and still continuing now. What I felt that these photographs of the ground beneath my feet gave to my work was that they linked me to my personal life. So they documented all the little journeys that I was doing, and as lockdown ended, I was taking pictures further afield and just charting where I'd been, but not so much from eye level, but from, well, my eye level, but looking down, a very sort of, I don't know, sort of narrow vision, I suppose. So then I started painting because I thought that that's what proper artists do, and I thought that I should probably be painting on canvas as well, because that was, you know, that was what really proper artists did, and I'd never really done that before, so I made myself do it, and initially I completely didn't enjoy it. It was horrible, but I pushed on through. And this was the photograph on the right hand side of your screen is the end of our second year, and that again, another sort of creative punctuation point. I made that painting because it was, my studies were driving my making, but then afterwards, when I'd reached that, it was like, well, what do I do next? So again, I found myself in the same situation that I'd been in previously, where, you know, I'd stopped. I had no, you know, had sort of reached this sort of this, I suppose, a void really in terms of where I go. So I started working on paper initially, and just experimenting and just sort of expanding on the work that I'd been doing, looking at light and looking at pavements and different times of day. But then very quickly, so that I was really enjoying that, but I didn't feel that it was proper, and that I knew that at some stage I was going to need to have, in my final year, I knew I was going to need an exhibition. So I didn't feel that working in this way was enough. Having my previous experience of having an exhibition in a really large space, I just thought it was going to be too small. So started working on canvas again, and that's when things really turned a corner, because I really enjoyed the methodical approach, and I just sort of was very I don't know, I forced myself to do it, and in the end it became second nature to me. But at the same time, I was asking myself, why am I doing this? Why am I making all these paintings? And again, the answer came back, because you have to, because you're on a course, you're in your final year now, and this is what you need to produce. But at the same time, I was enjoying the process, because my work was taking a different I suppose, taking on I was owning it more, I think. And I think that the development through just restricting myself in terms of only working on canvas, I think I saw much greater depth to my work. And eventually I started to feel that I was more engaged with it, and that it wasn't just a reaction. I was actually an integral part of what I was making. So once I was still making ceramics, I just had a brief stint of making ceramics, and then once I'd had my exhibition as part of my final year, that was it. You know, that the making was done. I had completed that part of it. So then again, I'm thinking creatively, I want to make something, but what do? I have no target, I have no purpose. I'm still taking pictures, still my beloved pavements, and thinking, well, what's going to happen with these? And then I returned to paper again. So paper was, I realized actually this is where I felt happiest. And I thought, right, okay, you need to really, get back into this. And you need to start thinking about how you can really just be honest with yourself, I suppose. And so the effect and the sort of the tactile quality of working on paper really appeals to me. So I think I was honest with myself. And then I came having a bit of a clear out, found my little notes again, and just realized actually this links in with what I've been trying to get at all along. And I thought, well, now I've got the space and time, it made more sense to me. And I think having been through the process of the course, it made me realize that actually I can do this now. This connects. I have the experience of 3 years to sort of bolster me, and just I don't know, it was a moment, and it was quite ethereal, but it just seemed to mean more, and I'd completely forgotten that I had this. And then coincidentally, I had been so I'd been looking at circles, so I'd been sort of collecting circles, and hadn't realized that I'd made those notes all that time ago. But now that I don't have the pressure of academia, I feel much freer in a way. I've got the skills and the mindset to be more effective in how I explore, and I've been able to just explore materials, and I think that the materials are guiding what I make now. So I've been working digitally because I find that really practical, in terms of, I can do that wherever I like, and it's quick, and I like quick is good. But the overall processes that I'm going through in terms of when I make and how I make are much slower and much more drawn out. And I think for me, that means that when I do make now, it's more meaningful to me, and that I'm able to really consider what I'm going to make, rather than just, just having this sort of internal pressure, self-imposed pressure to just churn stuff out. I don't feel that anymore. I have a much better attitude, I think, in terms of what I'm making, and I'm now working. I'm still not making with clay anymore, even though I've now got my kiln, and I have everything I need to be able to make stuff out of clay. I'm making stuff out of resin, and I just love it. I just love it. It's like making jewelry, and so I feel as though I've got the space and time to explore in a much more relaxed state. And this is a much softer approach. I feel it's much gentler and it's more organic, I think. So I'm just letting things happen in a much more I don't know, just a kinder way, I suppose, kinder to myself. And I no longer feel guilty about making time for myself. I think I grew out of that quite quickly, actually, after some way through the course. But I think that my legacy of making, which I've just very briefly shared with you, it really kind of shows me how I've made time for myself. And I think that process that I've gone through over the whole year has really made me value the time that I have now, and I don't feel a pressure to produce stuff. I'm just enjoying messing about, I think is the phrase. And it's not, and I don't think I would have been like that had I not had the rigor of study. I think it's an interesting process that I've gone through, and that whole, it feels like very much like a cyclical thing that I've gone in one gigantic circle, because I've gone right back to the beginning. But at the same time, within that, there have been lots of mini little circles where they've stopped and started again. And I keep asking myself, I think the pervading question is what next? What am I going to do next? So it's like that constantly searching, whereas before I would have made something and then left it. Now it's now that I know how, that I think research has become inherent in the way I look at things and the way I analyze things. So it's almost a sort of right, you've made that, but what if now? How about now? So I must say it's very enjoyable, and I do enjoy having the time and the space, the brain space to do that. So yeah, so there we go. That's me.
Thank you, Zoe. That was great. There was so much in there that was really rich. Yeah, well done. Excellent. Thank you. Very confidently delivered as well. I'm going to open it up to questions. We have quite a few people. Oh, we've got Irina has her hand raised. Go for it, Irina.
Zoe, my question, I have a really predictable question. When are your rings going on sale?
Oh yeah, okay, yes.
my daughter and I both really love the purple one with like a star in it. I think
okay.
Turns wear it.
Okay.
Are you going to sell them or make them available?
Of course, Irina, I will. I'm just perfecting the technique of how to polish the edges, and I'm just getting together a really lovely little display thing of them. But as soon as you'll know when they're available.
Awesome.
And I owe you one as well, Rachel.
You do. You promised.
Yeah, I do.
You know I would wear it all the time as well.
I do know that.
Would be a good advert for you. Okay, any other questions for Zoe? Yes, Juliet.
Hi everybody, I'm a sort of an intruder because I'm not really part of the course, but I am an artist and I work at Brookes, and I have done a training years ago at the École des Beaux-Arts, which was much more kind of fluffy than what you guys had, I can assure you, if you're not. So I've made my way over the years, but I'm still a practicing artist and I'm getting back into it myself a bit more recently. So I suppose, so thank you. That was really so interesting and fascinating, and your energy and your, wow, I just loved it. Thank you. I was thinking, oh no, why didn't you, I was sort of feeling sad every time you moved on almost. But No, I was just interested because I don't know what the word is for somebody obsessed with pavements, but I understand that. And it's interesting because it kind of relates to kids who are obsessed with cracks in the pavement. And I was thinking, I was kind of thinking about that whilst also seeing you'd moved on to this, to this, to this. And I see that you said you like things to go quick, and I see you do, because I'm a slow. But we each have our kind of our ways. And I suppose what I was interested in is, as you move forward, feeling this is great, this is leading me to this next thing. How are you linking it back? Because the one thing I saw as the underlying theme throughout was the pavements, really. For me, that was it. And I know that you've come back, as you said, full circle to rings and loops and things like that. But it was kind of how you situated the pavement currently. I suppose that was my intrigue. Yeah.
I think for a very long period of time, the pavements were very closely related to my paintings. They've taken a backseat now, and I think that now that I'm looking at sort of I'm doing a lot of, when I'm working with resin, I'm doing a lot of inclusions and keeping things precious and saving things and using basically lots of sort of tat that would otherwise be thrown away, and sort of making it into a precious thing. I think in the way that it links with the thing that intrigued me about the pavements was that I see them as beautiful things, and it's that whole notion of something that is damaged and broken and overlooked and very mundane can actually be represented as something glamorous and valuable and surprisingly beautiful. And I see that certainly with the photographs that I take of paintings. So it was very much that kind of take something really rubbish and turn it into something really nice. So I suppose that's where the link is.
Oh, thanks. That's great. Yeah, and maybe you could talk to Oxford City Council about broken pavements, but I'll stop there.
Well, Salisbury has enough, I'm sure. We're good for them.
Okay, we have another question from Laurie Ann.
Hi. Can you see me all right?
Yeah.
I'm an interloper as well, but I'm actually very interested in the course. And Zoe, I found your talk so interesting from the perspective of a prospective student. How did you kind of, what's the word, balance your working life with your creative?
Yes, well, I'll tell you, yes. Yeah, that's a really good point, because I work full time as a teacher. And when I started the course, my 2 children were living at home and they subsequently went to university. So I think initially it was fine. It was kind of, the course has a slow run up. So it's pretty, it's very manageable to start off with. And I found it fitted in perfectly because everything was at the weekends or in holidays. And it was very doable. And then as time, I suppose I chose to put an awful lot into it. I could have probably put less effort into it, but I was so invested. I thought, well, I've come this far. I owe it to myself. And also because it's so enjoyable, you don't really feel like it's hard work. But I'm pretty sure, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that I was the only person in my year who was teaching full time. I think everybody else was were you, Tanya? Yeah, not full time, Caroline. But I think, I mean, it's definitely doable. Definitely, yeah.
And how far are you from Oxford? Because obviously
I live in Salisbury.
Ah, so you're fair distance. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's really helpful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Caroline would like to come in on this.
Hello. Maybe point 8, Zoe, and a head of department, I'd just like to say.
Yeah.
Anyhow, that's nothing to do with what I want to ask. I want to ask you about your works on paper. You kept referring to them as the thing you enjoyed the most, but you didn't think that they were enough.
Yeah.
Why don't you think they're enough? And if you could frame them really beautifully and put them in galleries, I think they're gorgeous, and I think you should value them more.
Well, I do now, but I didn't at the time. I just thought they were just doodles and just little tests and experiments. But now I know better. So, you know, thank you for that compliment.
You're very welcome, my friend.
Zoe, would you say that was an experience, or that was you talked a little bit about internal pressure that you felt? Did you think that to be an artist you had to do something else?
Yes, I think so. And I think maybe it was all part of the journey that I went on in a sense, I think, because my specialism is ceramics, and I've always wanted to be a painter, as it were. And I thought, well, this is my opportunity to do that. But I did it, and I can do it, but it wasn't the thing that I struggled to get the same what I wanted on canvas that I was getting on paper. And afterwards I just thought, well, why aren't you working on paper then? Yeah. And I think it's that whole, I don't know, it takes a while, doesn't it, sometimes, to realize things, and you can be so sort of stuck into what you're actually, you know, you need to step away from it. And I think that whole moment when the course ended and I'd graduated and I could step away from it and I could think, right, what am I going to do now? Am I going to keep making? Why am I going to make stuff? What's, you know, am I going to sell it? Am I going to exhibit it? Or am I just going to enjoy making it? And then I think that gave me the space, which I wasn't expecting. It's suddenly that void, because you're so, you know, that whole period, the run up to submitting the dissertation, that's all you think about, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then afterwards it's just done. Gone. There's nothing. Yeah. And you think, well, hang on a minute, what am I gonna do? Yeah, so I think then I just thought, yeah, now I can make things without worrying about whether I need to write my lit review, or, you know, whether I have to write in my reflective journal about the scribbles that I've just done. I can just do it for the sake of it. And I think that's where I am now. I'm just enjoying just doing it. So yeah.
We've got a couple of hands up. Caroline, is your hand still up, or is that a new hand? It's not a new hand. Down. There are a couple of questions as well from Heidi in the chat. She can't. Her mic isn't working. So just very quickly from Heidi, she says, "Have you ever worked in concrete? And is it something that you would consider?"
Oh my gosh, concrete. No, I haven't, but I have considered taking plaster casts, and there's we've got a very nice new oh my gosh, police station in Salisbury that has some really lovely fossil stone cladding on it. I mean, it's real fossils, and I've just thought, oh, I could just start taking plaster casts of things now. So
buildings, lovely. No, that'd be, yeah. So I might.
And you've tried rubbings.
Yes, really good. Absolutely. Yes, yeah. And I can see that she says, "Do you now consider yourself an artist?" Yes, I do.
And have you got another exhibition in the pipeline?
Kind of, yes. We're trying to get an alumni exhibition together.
Yes, in the summer.
Yes, yeah, trying to, but the venue is the issue. So if anybody knows of a venue, Bernie, we need a venue, but we've got loads of people. So lots of alumni have said they want to take part in an exhibition.
Zoe, it depends where you want to do it, but we could potentially talk to Fusion Arts because they give you free space. So there's a space in Gloucester Green in Oxford.
Okay, we'll do that then, Rachel. Thanks.
Okay.
I was going to say, so there's a new initiative in Oxford to use up empty retail spaces.
Oh, brilliant.
They're available for galleries and shows, and I know somebody, unfortunately, my daughter has moved on from the gallery, having had her first show. She now has another job. So, I
think the Fusion Arts are involved with that as well, Bernie. So maybe we could go to them and.
Yeah, great. Okay, we'll do that then. Brilliant.
Nikki.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me today?
Yes.
Thank you, Zoe. Thanks so much. I know I have to be quick. I found that so interesting. What I'd like to know is, because I'm freaking out as a first year when you said a slow run up. I'm like, are you kidding me? What's a slow run up?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I'm actually sweating my palms, like just thinking about that. Okay. I will get out of that one. But do you think that you found yourself, your voice as an artist now? Because like listening to you, you're looking at your works on paper, you're looking at, and Rachel knows I'm having this issue with doing what I think I should be doing and not having a clue what I want to do, because I'm not even hearing that voice. And I kind of associate with you, I see that journey of yours, you were kind of grabbing at different things about self-imposed expectations. And I think the latter work is beautiful, and it looks like, it reminds me of glass, and goes back to that idea of something being precious that you had in your little glass, your little jars, first of all, and you've gone back to something being really precious. But do you feel like, oh, I feel viscerally that this is where I'm at now?
Yeah, I think so. And I think I've got the confidence to just go with it. I think in my first year, I was just playing, and there's nothing wrong with that. I was just exploring, because I hadn't made anything at that level or frequency for such a long time, and it felt really justified because it was part of a course. So I wasn't just, grabbing a quick half an hour when I had it. I think it was I think gradually I got more and more confident in terms of understanding that actually my ideas were justified, and they were real, and they were grown up, and it was okay, and that as long as I thought that, other people would believe it as well. And I think it was when other people outside of my family or university started to refer to me as an artist. I think a couple of people out in sort of the Salisbury community, people who I made friends with, referred to me to other people as Zoe as an artist. I thought, shit, I must be. So it's that kind of thing. And I think it's that whole sort of if you walk the walk, then everybody will believe you. And it's not about being fake, but it's just I think gradually you learn to accept yourself, and that the work you're making, it's not naive, because we're not those kind of people. We're mature, we've had a life, we've done our study initially. You've just got to keep at it, and not worry too much about whether it fits into a particular sort of expectation of you.
Thank you, Zoe. Thank you.
You're muted, Rachel.
You're muted, Rachel.
Typical. I know that Lorianne has got her hand up, and that Tanya had her hand up as well. If you could, folks, I think we need to move on, because I don't want to move to take up much more of Irina's time to present. But if you could just pop your questions in the chat, and then we can come to them at the end, if that's okay. Lovely, thank you. Okay, I'm going to, what was that, Tanya? Yeah, indeed. Yeah, thank you. Okay, let's move on to Irina. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to Rachel, who started the seminar series, and thank you to Zoe, who gave me a bit of a kick up the backside to present along with you. First thing I wanted to say before I start is if at any point you can't hear me or my sound is going glitchy, then please let me know in the chat, because my laptop's a bit dodgy and sometimes it glitches up the sound. So yeah, just let me know if there's any problems with sounds. So I was going to talk about my own experience of creating art. So both during the course and a little bit after the course. As Rachel said, we are fairly recent graduates. So we haven't actually, I'm sure I'm not the only one in kind of finding that I haven't really got my mind back together yet, after finishing the course and decided, what I'm going to do next. But I'm getting there, definitely getting there. So my practice is fairly unconventional. So I am a comics artist. And I always have been a comics artist. I know there's a lot of people who are on the course with me. They're just probably thinking to themselves, "Oh, it's here she goes again with her comics." So it's just something I've always been really passionate about. I've always known I was interested in comics, coming kind of from reading comics as a child to starting drawing my own comics as a young adult and then as an adult. And then there came a point when I just realized in about 2018 or something that as well as reading comics and drawing them, you can also study them. So I kind of decided to incorporate that into my art that I was creating during the course. So when I just started the course, these were my initial questions that I approached the course with. I was looking at the art that I had created before starting the course.
Irina, sorry to interrupt. It's not moving. Your slide isn't moving on. I can't see your slide moving on.
Okay.
Maybe if you start the slideshow.
Yep. How's that now?
I can see the slides, but it's not showing as a slideshow at the moment.
Ah, that is bizarre. Okay.
Maybe if you click on the second one, I can see them down the side. Oh, there we go. There we go. That's it.
Yeah. All good?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so the questions that I was asking myself, I hopefully now here on your screens. So because, as I said, my practice was, so different from, fine artists and so on, I felt that I felt that once I started the course, I might feel like not just a, square peg in a round hole, but like a, I don't know, tetrahedron in the round hole, and I was thinking about the art I'd created previously and thinking, can I even consider it to be art? Would other people consider it to be art? And, how would the art that I've created fit within the course? And how can I still express what I wanted to express, by drawing comics, what kind of materials I would use, what kind of process I would use. So at that point, I was mostly a digital artist. So I was creating a lot of my comics digitally. And, I was very rigid in my processes. So by that point, I'd been creating comics in the same kind of way for years, both kind of commissioned work and my own work as well. So these were the questions that I approached the course with. The questions I'm going to focus on today in the presentation are the what, the why, and the how of comics. So, we'll be talking about just very briefly about what comics are, what types of comics they are, and why I chose them as my main art form, and how my artistic practice transformed during the course and after. So there's a massive variety in comics. Here's a little meme that I made earlier. So there's just this is a tiny fraction of my comics collection. And what initially attracted me to this art form is the variety of it, and the variety of both kind of stories that you can tell through comics, as well as the art styles. I found out that comics can be very kind of art driven as well as story driven. You don't have to kind of have the characters or the narrative structure or anything like this. You can literally just go with the flow. You don't have to organize it in very rigid fragments like traditional comics of the big two, have. So there was, once I've discovered this massive variety, that kind of really helped me explore my practice more and kind of decide where I would like to take it and what I would like to try out. There are lots of kind of, types of comics, so comics are they're not a genre. Lots of people say that comics are a genre. They are a medium. So there are lots of genres within comics. There are also lots of different types. Some of them are sort of country specific or culture specific, such as the fumetti or the manga or the manhwa, and so on. They're just developed in contact with the kind of the culture that they came from. What all of them have in common, or what I used to think all of them have in common, is the kind of the structure, the basic anatomy. I used to think that, you know, in order to be a comics artist, you would have to draw action that would go into the boxes, so the panels, and I would have to draw speech bubbles and so on. So at the start of the course, I was kind of quite rigid in my thinking. However, I've moved on quite a lot since then. I've kind of reconsidered the kind of the definition of comics, and the thought that, you know, anything that uses an image or sequences of images to transmit an idea could be considered a comic. So, for example, if you're doing a series of paintings that are kind of, you know, in sequence, you could consider yourself a comics artist. You know, that's, you know, no one says you can't do that. So I kind of realized there's a lot more to comics than I initially thought. And that led me to kind of thinking about how I would define myself within that kind of, you know, big framework. I mean, I use at the moment, I kind of feel using the comics artist definition quite of myself, quite sort of all encompassing. I use it as a kind of a catch-all term, really. A lot of people who create comics, they prefer calling themselves sort of cartoonists or sequential artists, graphic artists, and so on. There's a lot of different kind of sort of interconnected terms. And I was kind of thinking which of those definitions kind of fits me, fits my practice. And I found that comics artist is a kind of a catch-all sort of term that, you know, I could sort of move freely within without kind of restricting myself to one particular type of comics. Also, I had a bit of an issue with kind of calling myself a graphic novelist, because graphic novels are basically like an artificial term that the publishing industry invented in order to sell more comics, because you call them graphic novels and they kind of sounds posh. So that's sort of why I'm kind of against calling myself a graphic novelist. And for the same reason, I'm also against calling myself a cartoonist, because when I think of cartoons, I kind of, you know, it's the connotations again, you know, it's the sort of the cartoon strips, and that's not what I'm creating. So when in the past, you know, when people have been saying, oh, this is Irina, she creates cartoon strips. I don't create cartoon strips, I create comics. So yes, and one of the comic scholars that I'm really influenced by, and who I was very lucky to meet a few years ago, one of his very famous phrases is saying, I don't know, he was the editor of a journal of graphic novels and comics, and he was saying that doesn't make sense. It's like saying journal of carrots and vegetables, you know, because comics is a kind of a wider term than all the other ones. So yes, for the argument's sake, I am a comics artist, and I'm going to call myself a comics artist. So one of the reasons why I kind of decided to go along with that art form and not change it at the start of the course, not just because I felt the most comfortable creating comics, which I did, but also I just realized that it actually had a lot of potential applications that I really wanted to explore, you know, both in education, you know, as a kind of a research method for educational research, but also using comics as data itself, as research. So I got really interested in a sort of evocative autoethnography, and I kind of found that so I was reading a lot of Bochner and Ellis at the time, and I found that what they were doing with words, with stories, with narratives, I could do with pictures, with images. And also I could potentially use comics in like all of my projects that I would be doing during the course, because there would be an application for comics in all of them. With the in terms of art practice, I just found that comics were kind of versatile enough to reflect lots of inspiration that came from lots of different places. So I'm very inspired by mythology, by folklore, by sort of stories, traditions, landscape. I'm also inspired by poetry, and I kind of found that, you know, all of this would be, you know, applicable in my practice, you know, whilst I could still, you know, kind of be inspired by all of that, and I would still be able to create comics. And one other consideration was that I could create comics anywhere with the tools that I had. So it's kind of similar to what Zoe said about her using digital, kind of digital art. You know, it's very practical, as Zoe said, and because I'm very kind of restricted with both space and time, you know, I don't have a studio, I only have a fairly small desk in a converted garage, basically. And my time's quite limited as well. So I found that if I stuck to kind of creating comics, I wouldn't have to, I don't know, buy lots of materials that I didn't have, you know, or didn't have to use, I don't know, a kiln or something. If I was a sculptor, for example, you know, I would probably have to go somewhere else. So yes, that sort of creative freedom, you know, something that really attracted me to that art form and encouraged me to just keep, you know, kind of sort of stick to comics. What I kind of wanted to explore initially was how I could create using different media and how I could play with the actual form. So investigate and explore the comics form itself. These are the some of the things I created in the first year. So I was thinking about kind of creating the sequential structure and the sort of the narrative, but instead of the digital space, I kind of moved it into the real, you know, the real time space, you know, the real life space. And I was using, you know, traditional materials. I was literally, instead of sort of using Photoshop or something like this, I would just, you know, get the scissors out, cut and paste. I made a fold out book. So it was suddenly all very hands-on. And that felt very unusual, felt very kind of strange, but also, you know, I really enjoyed the process. You know, I enjoyed being kind of, you know, still creating the way I wanted to create, but just using kind of different materials and experimenting with different materials as well. Taking those experiments one step further was creating a kind of a comics sort of textiles crossover, which was an absolute crazy idea, and something I didn't enjoy at the time because I'm not a textile person in the slightest. However, I thought I'd give it a go, and I did. So my initial inspiration for this one actually came from the lady who used to live in my house before I lived here. Sadly, she passed away, but apparently she was quite a well-known artist and sculptor in my village, and she was also really well known in the local WI. So I was inspired by some of the research I kind of unearthed about her and some of the textile work she created. And then Rachel's idea was actually, why don't you go to WI, Irina, and talk about, you know, the lady and show what you created as a response to her art. And I did. It was terrifying. It was my first time at the WI. But yes, it was an interesting experience, definitely. On the slide, you can see I ended up in like the little local magazine with with my art. So that kind of showed me that, you know, there really isn't sort of, you know, that there really aren't any restrictions. If I, you know, I mean, you know, it doesn't look like a comic, but it still feels like it because, you know, I was still using the same kind of approaches in creating my art. It's just I was using completely different materials that I wouldn't have used otherwise. So one other thing I was considering at first was, as Zoe was saying earlier, you know, Zoe started to paint because that's what real artists do. This was my kind of concern with exhibiting. So traditionally, artists, you know, create work they exhibit, they sell their work in galleries, they work with galleries. I had never at that point worked in a gallery or exhibited my work, or haven't even thought about it or considered it. So because it was one of the requirements of the module I was doing in second year to put together an exhibition, I just decided to kind of play it safe and put together an exhibition in a library, because I actually work in libraries quite a lot as a freelance educator. And that was a kind of, it was a tiny step out of my comfort zone that kind of led to a giant leap out of my comfort zone, because what happened a few months after that is one of the local galleries, the quite a well-known one in the area, actually contacted me and said, you know, would you work on with us on a project? It was during lockdown, and they had quite a lot of things planned, and we sort of took it further, and it ended up as this quite big exhibition in sort of, you know, so it was comics, you know, it was so I created 2 poetry comics based on poems that local residents wrote. So we chose like two winners, and I created comics based on their poetry. And there was also a bit of a collaborative part of it as well, where I was creating, kind of co-creating with local children, school children. So somehow I ended up standing in the middle of a gallery with my art in big size on the walls, thinking, wow, I'm actually exhibiting in a gallery. I'm a comics artist exhibiting in a gallery. That felt very strange, but not unpleasant. I mean, comics are notoriously difficult to exhibit. As a rule, you know, they're kind of, because of the nature of the art form, you know, there's always like this expectation that you would need to deconstruct it somehow, sort of take it apart, you know, or choose like a fragment and blow it up big or something like this, you know, or just display the cover or something. It's almost like, you know, initially what my feeling was that comics were not art enough to be in the gallery. However, I found out that actually, you know, that's, you know, here's my art on the gallery wall, and here's proof, you know, that comics do actually belong in the gallery. So that made me, you know, feel quite confident about, you know, my art form, and encouraged me to stick to my art form even more. So by that time, the lockdown was absolutely in full swing, and I was looking at the next task, which focused on kind of comic, I think it was picture voice or photo voice. And we were invited by Carmel to create a kind of a response, a visual response to how we have been learning in the during the lockdown, so the challenges. And that's when I had a slightly unexpected breakthrough. I had never, I mean, you know, personally, I'm really against auto-bio comics, because this is just my personal opinion. I think, you know, people who create auto-bio comics just have nothing else to talk about. They just have to talk about themselves, you know, which is not something I like to do, to be honest, you know. But when I used comics as a kind of almost like a visual sort of journal to an extent, or a tool to just document my, you know, my everyday experiences, I just found that this is something I'd never done previously, but I actually found it really, really effective. And because by that time I had pretty much had enough of the materials and the huge variety of materials, I just decided to keep it simple. And these were created basically just using black watercolor and a fine liner and some, you know, extra paper, and that's it, you know, because I just decided, you know, I've had enough of experiments, I know what works, I'm going to keep it simple. And taking that further as well, I again decided to use comics as a kind of a documenting tool, as a kind of a bit of autoethnography, and document my experiences. So one panel at a time. So I was creating one panel a day, and then I could also combine them, and sort of that's how I was doing my data coding. You know, I literally had lots of those panels and then thinking, how would they fit into a kind of some kind of narrative? And if they fit into the narrative, does that display like some sort of a theme? You know, what connects them? So here's one of the narratives that I put together. I called it juggling. So it's basically, I looked at those panels. They were created as separate things, and I thought, well, you know, they all kind of, you know, relate to my experience of sort of juggling everything during lockdown. You know, the family commitments, the work, the studying, you know, keeping it all together. So yeah, that's something I, you know, had never considered before, but that really, you know, showed me kind of the possibilities that comics present for, you know, both as kind of, you know, documenting data and as data itself. Kind of the similar approach I used in when I was presenting at conferences as well. So I started, you know, choosing kind of sections of my research and turning that into comics format. This is when I found that comics are extremely useful for communicating research. And, you know, it's just because that's how I normally visualize things. So when I think about my research, you know, if I think about it as a comic, you know, it's a lot easier for me to kind of visualize it like this rather than write it. I think the starting point of it was sometime, I think in the second year, when Rachel asked us to write our research as a story. I couldn't, and then I decided, oh, I'm going to draw a comic about it, and bang, I saw it, you know, which was amazing, you know. So I just kind of decided to take it further as well, and for as part of my final project, I drew a comic about my research. So that was, you know, something that I really enjoyed. And I found that I could literally incorporate all parts of my research into visuals. You know, there's you know, and that still makes it kind of academic, even though it looks like a comic. It's actually a kind of an article in comic format, because, you know, there are references at the bottom. So yeah, and, you know, I think it's kind of rigorous enough. You know, just as rigorous as a kind of a written academic article would be. So here's the power of comics. So where I am now is I am continuing on from the work I started for my my final project. So I started drawing, I think I did 2 separate narratives, the graphic narratives, but they are linked by a common theme or themes. And I started a 3rd as well, but unfortunately, I decided not to go through with it because I wouldn't have finished it to the same level as the other 2. So I'm now working on it in my own time. And, you know, as Zoe was saying, you know, with the academic pressure gone, you know, I feel like I could create a lot more freely. And yes, I'm still kind of experimenting now. I'm experimenting with a layout. So I'm keeping materials simple as well, but it's the layout that's my focus at the moment. You know, I would really want to kind of use more experimental layouts. And there are a lot of really inspirational comics artists there who do crazy things with the layouts. I mean, I was looking at Zoe's pavement photos earlier, thinking, wow, you know, I can see comic panels in those cracks, you know. So yeah, inspiration comes from strange places. So this page spread is probably the most experimental I've gone so far. But, you know, as I'm only just starting, I think probably will get more interesting, you know, more visually interesting than this. And what I'm planning to do next is, once I finish the 3rd narrative, I would like to put the 3 of them together and publish them in a book. So I have published books previously, and I kind of have contacts with a small publisher locally. And, you know, I've been going to sort of events, conventions, festivals, so on. So I was thinking about, you know, just taking my books and, yeah, hopefully, you know, we'll find its, hopefully if I have this published as a book, it will find its audience. It's very inspired, it's very influenced by kind of Wales and Welsh folklore. So I've been talking to a kind of an arts organization in Wales about possibly having it somehow published in Welsh as well as English. And the comic I showed earlier, so the comic Floating that I created during the lockdown, I'm very happy to say that it has found a bit of a home. So it was included in a special issue of a magazine, The Lockdown Lowdown. This issue was looking specifically at experiences of females during the lockdown, female artists, because obviously, females had a different impact. They were impacted by the lockdown differently, with childcare, and lots of them had to, cut down their hours or leave their jobs altogether. So I'm very, I'm very proud. I was very honored to have been included into this compilation. And also one other strand I've been trying out is sketchnoting, which is something I'm not brilliant at, but I find that, it's a really, it's a really interesting way to sort of visualize a presentation. So here are some of the conference proceedings at one of the conferences I was presenting at, and I was sketchnoting other people's presentations with a mixture of kind of little images and writing, and that was included in their conference proceedings as well. So that's something I might also explore in the future. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Irina. That was great. Well done. I'm quite interested. I know that there was a couple of people who had to go and they put thanks in the chat, but I'll come to questions in just a minute. I have a question first. Especially with the, that very meta piece of work that you did, where you created a comic about the experience of doing your dissertation research. I wonder whether or not you had considered submitting it to a journal. There's a particular journal, it's the journal for INSEA, I think it's called IJETA, and they accept, okay, Caroline, no worries, they accept visual narratives, so you could submit it as a visual narrative. But I just wondered if that was something that you might think about, because I think it would be great. I think you're absolutely right. It's academic work. It has the rigor in it, and it deserves to be viewed as academic work. Yeah.
It could be a good idea. And there's a couple of other journals as well that accept sort of articles in comics format.
Yeah.
The Comics Grid is one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could kind of think about it, but I actually earlier on a few months ago I actually submitted part of the art I created for the dissertation for a kind of a prize for academic work that deals specifically with Wales.
Yeah.
And I haven't heard back, but it's all right. It's worth a try.
That's great. I think, right, we've got quite a few comments in the chat. I think we've gone over 6 o'clock. So, but Catherine says, thank you very much. She has to go. Fantastic presentations. Lorianne, excellent, Irina. Absolutely love the way you've done your research, love the comics. Nikki, thank you both so much. What a wonderful insight into two such different artists, inspiring and scary. And thank you from Tanya. I can see Nikki's having a bit of a freak out. Don't worry, it's fine. You're going to be fine. I know that there was a question earlier. Monica has a question. Monica has her hand up. Hey, how nice to see you. You're muted.
Hi.
Hi.
Irina, I'm a big fan. And lots of things. Number one, I was named after a comic character from Brazil, Monica.
Oh, nice. Wow.
So I've grown up with comics, and I had as a teacher an experience where I was always preparing students for scholarships, and something you said really touched me is that you felt you weren't an artist because you know, and how do you define the comic artist? And there are so many names that sometimes are not derogatory, but they don't quite show the extent of the work. And I had an experience with one pupil that I was preparing for a scholarship, who was a fantastic comic artist, and he was extremely passionate about it. And we prepared this portfolio for him to present to his next school to go for a scholarship. And I felt obliged to make him put other kinds of work, because I always knew it had a connotation of not being art. So the idea for scholarships were always fine art. But most of his portfolio was this amazing work and drawings and stories and everything. And he went for his presentation and his interview. And when he got there, basically the head of art said, "It's absurd that your teacher sent you here with this. We are anti-cartoon. Cartoon is not art." And he came back completely distraught. And I just wanted to tell you that, oh, how I wish I knew then what I know from you now, and how far your comic work has gone to the point of being basically the dissertation itself. Because I think there is a misunderstanding about this kind of art, and a lot of kids are basically crushed when, like this boy, he was, I won't say it destroyed his passion for art. He still continued it, but it really had a big dent. And so I just wanted to say that it's not necessarily a question, but how you as a teacher, how do you work with comic in the classroom? Because of course I always taught, coming from the Japanese, from the work of Hokusai, to justify that comic art is art. So how do you present it as a teacher, not only as an artist? I know your work, but as a teacher. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your questions, Monica. I mean, at the moment, I work in a primary school, so I get to teach basically all sorts. You know, I teach like all subjects, and I always find that I always find ways of incorporating comics into anything. I've incorporated comics into maths, into RE, into virtually any subject, because they are so versatile. You know, it's not just about, I mean, what the story that you just told me is very, very moving. What the person failed to understand or acknowledge is that comics are not just cartoon drawings. They're not just cartoony styles. Comics can be done in any style. You're not restricted to one particular style. I mean, you know, I can literally, you know, tell you a list of really great comics artists, as you know, the list is as long as my arm, you know, but one name springs to mind is that an artist, Canadian artist called Julian Peters, who one of his books is basically a collection of poetry comics, and each comic is in a completely different style. So there are comics that look like a quilt. There's a manga style comics. There's a watercolor comics. There's like a really graphic one. You know, it's like a pen and wash one. It was all done by one person, but in lots of different styles, and they're all comics. So it would be great if people kind of saw the art form for the versatility that it offers, rather than the restrictions, you know.
Yeah.
So as I said, you know, in my practice as a teacher, you know, I draw comics with kids, you know, in all subjects, literally, you know, anything can be presented as a comic. And when some people say, oh, I can't draw, I'm not a very good drawer or something, I say, doesn't matter. Draw blobs, draw stick people, you know, it's just about, you know, just about drawing the actual, you know, what you want to draw, you know, rather than the kind of the beauty of it. We're not creating the Mona Lisa or whatever. you know, and that's kind of my experience, but in the school. But I'm also tutoring a young person, so a young non-binary person who is a fantastic illustrator. They create amazing character concepts, and they are doing their GCSE privately because they can't cope with a mainstream secondary school. And again, you know, there's the same issue. You know, they expect art the way they, you know, the way they kind of think of art. You know, they expect landscapes, still lives, you know, that sort of thing. You know, and all that person wants to do is create characters, and I just feel sorry for them because they are brilliant, they're very talented, and yet, you know, it's just kind of, again, you know, it's trying how to find how you can fit into this kind of art world, you know, but it's possible. I mean, it's tricky, but it's possible. Yeah, I think I just kind of lost about half of our audience.
Yeah, Irina, it's because we've gone past 6 o'clock, I think, because we advertised it from 5 till 6. So that's, I think people probably had things that they needed to go to. I just to pick up on what you were saying there, the restrictions come from the exam boards as well as from the schools, don't they? From the teacher's perception of what art is, but it's also that what is perceived as valuable by the exam board as well, or what becomes an orthodoxy, what becomes a regular kind of. I have there was one question that Laurianne put in the chat, and I want to open it up to both of you, which was, how has the course changed your teaching?
You go first, Zoe. You've been quiet. You had a chance to rest your voice.
Has it changed it? Yes, it has. And I think that it has changed it in that I have more empathy with my students in terms of how it takes so much longer than you might think to come up with an idea, fully explore that idea, present that idea. And I feel sorry for my students because we're so restricted in terms of time, and how difficult it is when it must be for them when you only have, you know, these little pockets of time, and you don't have the luxury of being able to pick and choose when you do it. And I think making things and learning how to connect with creativity is a much more protracted experience than we give them credit for, or that we give allocation to within education. And in order to you know, when you think you have to churn all this, present all this work at the age of 15, 16, it seems ridiculous to me, because I struggle with it now, and I'm just a little bit older than that. And yeah, I think that, and I think, but being as a teacher, I think I'm more aware of that struggle now, having been through it more recently myself. I'm more patient with it, I suppose, and more able to guide it. But also, I think being a practicing artist now, alongside being a teacher, I think it's added a lot of value to my experience and my engagement with art, and my sort of I suppose I have a broader experience of it, I suppose, and a broader knowledge, certainly. And I feel that has really given me credence in terms of talking about art to other people, and not just to students, but to other adults as well within school. So it's enriched my teaching. There we go.
Lovely, thank you, Zoe. Irina, what do you think?
I really agree with Zoe. The course really was an enriching experience. I am a lot more aware of my teaching and how I teach it, even if I, you know, sometimes when you teach, you know, there are actually parts in the lesson or parts in the school day when you kind of switch off and just sort of carry on autopilot almost. I am a lot more tuned in with my students and what they might experience, you know, how they respond to me, how they respond to what they're learning. That's kind of the general observation. And the other thing is kind of art specific. I'm trying to get across to all the children, young people I work with, is that there's more than one way of doing art, and there's no such thing as good art and bad art, because they are kind of put into those boxes when, I created something, look, I've drawn this, it's really bad. It's not bad, because all art is valid. What those children create, even if it's like a doodle on the margin in their book, is valid. It's the expression of themselves. And I'm just hoping that, I'll be able to get it across to some of them, so yeah.
I really love what you said and how you presented, and it's fantastic to see someone who sticks by their guns. And as I said in the chat, is that actually drawing comics, making comics is actually quite a skill. It's I find it really hard to do. So I really admire you. And you've actually opened up almost a world just by what you've said in just your brief bits of research. So thank you very much for that.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, folks, I know we went over a little bit, but that was the nature. Maybe that indicates that we should have slightly longer webinars. But thank you both so much for presenting your practice, and for taking the time to put together such thoughtful presentations, and for sharing those with everybody today. And I know that I will circulate the recording to the people that weren't able to be here, and I'm sure we'll get some positive feedback from that as well. So thank you all very much for coming, and massive thank you to Irina and Zoe for presenting your practice today. Okay, folks.
That was claps, by the way.